The Los Angeles morning sun filtered through the blinds of a modest bungalow in the hills, casting soft stripes across a wooden floor. Inside, Keanu Reeves sat at his kitchen table barefoot, holding a chipped ceramic mug filled with black coffee. The house was quiet. No assistants, no publicists, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of sparrows outside. He'd woken before dawn, as he often did, and spent the early hours reading letters from strangers. Notes slipped under his door or left at cafes where he sometimes stopped for breakfast. Most thanked him for small acts of kindness, holding a door, paying for a stranger's meal, listening when no one else would. His phone buzzed on the table. A text from his agent. Jimmy Kimmel wants you on the show next week. Not just promo, they want to talk. Real talk, Keanu read it twice. He'd been on late-night shows before, always polite, always brief. But lately, something had shifted in him. Maybe it was turning 60. Maybe it was the weight of all the years behind him. The losses, the quiet victories, the things no camera ever saw. He'd started wondering if silence was always the right choice. Maybe it was time to say something true, even if it wasn't polished or perfect. He typed back, "Okay, but only if we can skip the usual stuff." 2 days later, he walked into the studio lot off Hollywood Boulevard. No entourage. Just him in a worn leather jacket, jeans, and the same boots he'd had for 7 years. Security recognized him instantly but didn't make a fuss. "Morning, Mr. Reeves," one guard said, nodding. Keanu smiled. "Hey, how's your daughter doing?" The guard blinked, surprised. "She made the soccer team last week." "That's great," Keanu said, and meant it. Backstage, the energy was buzzing. Cameras being tested, cue cards shuffled. Makeup artists rushing between dressing rooms. But in one corner near the loading dock, a stagehand named Luis wiped down a mic stand. He'd worked on the show for 12 years. Seen movie stars throw tantrums over bottled water. Watched comedians crack jokes that never made it to air. Watched guests fake smiles until the red light went off. But Keanu? Luis remembered him from a taping 10 years ago. After the show, while everyone else rushed out, Keanu had stayed behind to help roll up cables. "You don't have to do that," Luis had said. "Yeah," Keanu replied, "but I want to." Now as Keanu passed by, he stopped. "Luis, right?" Luis looked up, stunned. "You remember me?" "Of course," Keanu said. "How's your back? Last time you said it was acting up." Luis laughed, shaking his head. "Better, thanks. You're the only guest who ever asked twice." That small moment, unseen by cameras, unrecorded, was the real story. Not the fame, not the red carpet, but the way someone famous could still see you, really see you, when the world told them they didn't have to. Upstairs in the green room, Jimmy Kimmel's team was finalizing the segment order. They'd planned something special, not just the usual banter about upcoming movies or funny anecdotes. They wanted to go deeper. Keanu had quietly supported grief counselors, funded shelters, visited hospitals without telling anyone. The producers had heard whispers, how he'd send handwritten notes to fans who'd lost loved ones, how he'd sit with crew members on film sets who were having a hard day. They wanted to shine a light on that side of him, the part that didn't make headlines but changed lives. One producer, a woman who'd lost her brother the year before, had pushed hardest for the serious segment. "People think he's just nice," she'd told the team. "But it's more than that. It's like he carries everyone's pain with him. Gently." They'd even arranged a surprise, a woman Keanu hadn't seen in 20 years. Someone from his early days in Toronto, who'd written him a letter after her son died by suicide. She'd said Keanu's words in an old interview, "Grief is love with nowhere to go," had kept her from giving up. They hoped the reunion would be moving, not staged, just human. Keanu arrived in the green room just as they were rehearsing the intro. He listened quietly as the producer explained the plan. When she mentioned the surprise guest, he didn't smile. He looked down at his hands. "Is she okay with this?" he asked. "Really okay?" The producer assured him she was. He nodded slowly. "All right. But if she seems uncomfortable, we stop." No questions. That was the thing about him. He didn't care about ratings or viral moments. He cared about people feeling safe. As showtime neared, the audience filed in, buzzing with excitement. "Keanu Reeves," someone whispered, like saying a prayer. Backstage, Luis adjusted the guest chair one last time, making sure it wouldn't squeak. He thought about his daughter's soccer game that weekend. Maybe he'd tell her Keanu asked about her. She'd never believe him. In the hallway, Keanu took a deep breath. He wasn't nervous about being on TV. He was nervous about getting it right, about honoring the quiet truth of what it meant to keep going after everything fell apart. He thought of his daughter who never got to take her first steps, of his partner, whose laugh still echoed in his dreams, of his best friend gone too soon. He didn't want to perform grief. He wanted to speak from it honestly, without turning it into entertainment. The stage manager gave the signal. 5 minutes. Keanu smoothed his jacket not out of vanity but habit, a small gesture of respect for the people who'd come to listen. He walked toward the curtain, not with the swagger of a movie star, but with the steady step of someone who'd learned that showing up, even when it hurts, is its own kind of courage. Out in the audience, a woman clutched a photo of her late husband. She'd driven 3 hours just to be in the same room as Keanu, hoping maybe, just maybe, hearing him speak would make her feel less alone. And as the music swelled and the lights brightened, no one knew yet that this wouldn't be a typical talk show episode. No one knew that kindness, when tested, could look like quiet strength. No one knew that sometimes the most powerful moments begin not with a joke, but with a pause, a breath held in shared understanding. But for now, there was just the warmth of the stage lights, the murmur of anticipation, and a man walking into the spotlight not to dazzle but to connect. The studio lights warmed the stage as Keanu stepped out to thunderous applause. He waved gently, not with the practiced ease of someone used to adoration, but with the quiet gratitude of a person who still couldn't quite believe people cared. He took his seat across from Jimmy Kimmel, who leaned forward with that familiar grin. Friendly, quick, always ready with a quip. The first few minutes flowed, like they always did on late-night TV. Laughter bubbled up when Keanu described getting lost on his motorcycle in downtown LA and accidentally delivering a package meant for someone else. I just kept going, he said, shrugging. Figured I'd drop it off since I was already there. The audience loved it. The image of Hollywood's most unlikely courier, helmet askew, trying to be helpful. Kimmel chuckled, shaking his head. Only you could turn a wrong turn into a public service. It felt easy, comfortable, like two old friends catching up, even though they barely knew each other. The crew relaxed. Luis, watching from the wings, allowed himself a small smile. Maybe this would be one of those rare nights where something real happened on stage, something that stuck with people long after the credits rolled. Then came the shift. Kimmel glanced at his notes, then back at Keanu, his tone softening just slightly. You know, he began, you've been through so much in your life, and yet you're always, calm, kind, like nothing ever breaks you. He paused, then added with a half-smile, I mean, if my life had your plot twists, I'd be living in a cabin somewhere, yelling at squirrels. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience. It was meant to be light, a way to acknowledge pain without diving too deep. But Keanu didn't laugh. He didn't frown either. He just went very still. His eyes, usually so open, seemed to pull inward, like he'd stepped behind a door only he could see. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The silence stretched just long enough to feel heavy. Then Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice low but clear. Those weren't plot twists, Jimmy. The room didn't go dead silent. It never does in a live taping, but the energy changed. Like air being let out of a balloon slowly, carefully. People stopped shifting in their seats. Someone coughed nervously. Kimmel blinked, caught off guard. He'd made that kind of joke before, with other guests about other things. It was part of the rhythm of the show. Touch on something serious, then lift it with humor so it doesn't weigh too much. But this time the lift didn't work. Oh, right, of course, Kimmel said quickly, holding up his hands. I didn't mean it like that. It's just, you know how it is. We keep it light. Keanu nodded, but his expression didn't soften. I get why you'd say that, he said. But my daughter, she wasn't a storyline. My partner wasn't a twist. They were real people. And what happened to them? It's not something you bounce back from like it's a bad day at the office. His voice never rose. There was no anger, no accusation. Just truth, spoken plainly, like he was saying it not for the cameras but for himself, for them. In the front row, the woman who'd driven 3 hours clutched her photo tighter. Her eyes filled. She knew that tone, the one that comes after years of smiling through grief because the world expects you to move on. Backstage, Luis froze, a coiled cable in his hand. He'd heard stories about Keanu's losses, of course. Everyone had. But hearing him say it like that, so raw, so unguarded, felt like witnessing something sacred. Kimmel shifted in his chair. He wasn't used to this. On his show, pain was acknowledged, then neatly wrapped in a joke so no one had to sit with it too long. But Keanu wasn't playing by those rules. "Look," Kimmel said, trying to recover, "I respect that, truly. But we're live. People are watching. We've got a show to do." Keanu looked at him, not with hostility, but with something deeper. Disappointment, maybe, or just clarity. "If we're going to talk about loss," he said, "let's talk about it like real people, not like it's a setup for a punchline." The audience didn't clap. They didn't boo. They just sat there, stunned into stillness. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was something else, something human, messy and real. A producer in the control room signaled frantically for a cut, but the director held off. There was a strange electricity in the air, the kind that doesn't come from scripted drama, but from genuine collision, when two worlds meet and neither bends. Kimmel ran a hand through his hair. "Man, I didn't mean to—" "I know you didn't," Keanu interrupted gently. "But intention isn't always enough. Sometimes you have to think about what it feels like on the other side of the joke." He wasn't lecturing. He was just sharing, like he might with a friend over coffee late at night when the masks come off. Then slowly, Keanu stood up. Not dramatically. Not with a slam or a glare. He just rose from the chair as if he'd said what he needed to say, and staying longer wouldn't help. "I think I'm done," he said. Kimmel stared at him, mouth slightly open. "You're leaving?" "I don't think this is the right space for what I came to say," Keanu replied. "And that's okay." He turned to the audience. "Thank you for having me." Then to Kimmel. "I hope you understand." And just like that, he walked off stage. Not fast, not slow. Just steady, like a man who'd walked through fire before and knew how to move without looking back. Backstage, chaos erupted in hushed tones. "Do we go to commercial? Who's on next? Did he just walk off?" But Luis didn't move. He watched Keanu disappear down the hall, shoulders straight, hands in his pockets, already gone from the spectacle. In the audience, the woman wiped her eyes. She didn't feel sad. She felt seen. For the first time in years, someone had said out loud what she'd been too afraid to voice. That grief isn't something you get over. It's something you carry. And sometimes you just need people to stop pretending it's funny. Up in the control room, the producer who'd pushed for the serious segment sat quietly, tears in her eyes. She knew this wasn't how it was supposed to go. But maybe, just maybe, it was how it needed to go. Outside, the Los Angeles night hummed with traffic and distant sirens. Keanu stepped out a side door, away from the cameras, away from the noise. He didn't call a car. He just started walking, hands in his jacket pockets, head down, lost in thought. He wasn't angry. He was tired. Tired of grief being turned into content. Tired of pain being smoothed over with a laugh so no one feels uncomfortable. He'd come to speak honestly, not to perform healing for an audience. And in walking away, he'd said more than any rehearsed monologue ever could. Back in the studio, Kimmel sat alone on the stage for a long moment, staring at the empty chair across from him. The red light on the camera blinked off. The audience murmured, unsure whether to leave or wait. No one knew what to do next, because for the first time in years the script had failed. And what was left wasn't a show. It was a moment, raw, unplanned, and utterly human. And sometimes those are the moments that change everything. The moment Keanu stepped off stage, the air backstage turned thick with confusion. No one shouted. No one ran after him. They just stood there, producers, camera operators, stagehands, frozen in that strange limbo between live television and real life. Someone finally called, "Cut! Commercial break!" And the band kicked in with a too cheerful jingle, but the damage was already done. The spell of the show had broken. Luis, still near the loading dock, watched Keanu disappear down the hallway toward the exit. He didn't follow. He just nodded to himself like he understood something no one else had time to see yet. This wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't ego. It was something quieter, heavier, like watching someone protect a flame in a windstorm. Inside the studio, Jimmy Kimmel stayed seated. His smile was gone. He ran a hand over his face, then looked at his producer, who stood just off camera with wide eyes. "What the hell was that?" Kimmel asked, but it wasn't really a question. It was more like he was trying to piece together how a normal interview had turned into whatever that was. He didn't yell. The producer said quietly. He just stopped playing along. Back in the control room, monitors showed the audience still sitting, unsure if they should clap, leave, or wait for something else to happen. A few people were whispering. One woman was crying, not loudly, just silently, with her hand over her mouth. The crew had seen guests storm off before, usually over contract disputes or bad lighting. But this felt different. It felt personal. Meanwhile, Keanu was already outside, walking down the street under the orange glow of streetlights. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look back. He just walked, his boots clicking softly against the pavement. The city noise, the honking cars, the distant bass from a passing truck, wrapped around him like a blanket. He wasn't running away. He was just choosing not to stay where he didn't feel safe. Inside the studio, the team scrambled. The next guest was a comedian scheduled for a 10-minute stand-up set. But no one felt like laughing now. The head producer made a quick call. Push him to the end. We'll do a musical guest instead. She turned to Kimmel. You okay? Kimmel exhaled. I messed up, didn't I? It wasn't malicious, she said. But it landed wrong. That's the thing, he said, staring at the empty chair. I didn't think it would hurt. I thought I was giving him credit for being strong. But grief isn't about being strong. She replied gently. It's about being human. Up in the green room, the woman who was supposed to be the surprise guest sat quietly, still in her coat. She'd heard everything from the monitor. When Keanu said his daughter wasn't a plot twist, she'd started crying. Not because she was sad, though she was, but because someone famous had finally said out loud what she'd been feeling for years. That love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes shape, and turning that into a joke, even a gentle one, felt like a betrayal. She stood up and told the assistant, I don't think I'm needed here anymore. Then she left. Not with anger, but with a strange sense of peace. She'd come hoping for a moment with Keanu. Instead, she got something better, a reminder that she wasn't alone in protecting her son's memory. Back on the main floor, the crew reset the stage. Chairs were moved. Lights adjusted. But the mood didn't lift. Even the band played softer, like they could feel the shift. Luis finally moved, heading toward the dressing room hallway. He passed a security guard talking into his radio. Yeah, he's gone. Left on foot. No issues. The guard saw Luis and shrugged. They're saying he was removed, but he just walked out. Calm as anything. Luis snorted. Of course he did. Later, in the break room, two junior producers debated what to tell the press. We can't say he stormed off, one said. It'll look bad, but we can't say nothing, the other replied. The internet's already buzzing. They settled on a vague statement. Due to unforeseen circumstances, tonight's interview with Keanu Reeves was cut short. We thank him for his time, it wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. By midnight, the first clips were online. Grainy phone footage from the audience showed Keanu standing, saying something low and serious, then walking away. The captions read, Keanu Reeves walks off Kimmel after fight, and Hollywood star loses it on live TV. But the people who were actually there told a different story. A fan posted a thread. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just said, my daughter's name isn't a joke. And then he left. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. That post got thousands of shares. People started replying with their own stories about losing parents, siblings, children, and how they hated when people said, you're so strong. Like that made the pain okay. Keanu didn't see any of it. He was home by then, sitting on his porch with a cup of tea watching the stars. He didn't regret leaving. He regretted that it had to happen at all, that in 2025, in a world full of cameras and microphones, it was still hard to talk about loss without someone turning it into a bit. He thought about the woman in the audience, the one who looked like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. He hoped she felt a little lighter now. That was all he'd ever wanted. Not fame, not praise, just to make someone feel less alone. Back at the studio, Kimmel couldn't sleep. He replayed the moment in his head over and over. He hadn't meant harm, but meaning well wasn't the same as doing well. He remembered his own losses, the family members he'd buried, the nights he'd cried in silence. He'd never wanted anyone to joke about those moments. So why had he thought it was okay to do it to someone else? He picked up his phone, scrolled to Keanu's number, saved from years ago after a charity event. He stared at it for a long time. Then he typed a message, deleted it, typed again. Finally, he sent, "I owe you an apology. Not for the show. For me?" He didn't expect a reply, and he didn't get one that night. But the next morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Keanu saw the message. He read it 3 times. Then he typed back just 2 words. "Call me." And just like that, the real conversation, the one that mattered, was about to begin. Not on camera. Not for ratings. Just 2 people, trying to understand each other in a world that often forgets how to listen. Within hours, the internet had its story. Keanu Reeves kicked off Jimmy Kimmel's show after explosive argument, screamed one headline. Another showed a blurry screenshot with bold red text. Hollywood star loses at live on air. Talk shows picked it up. Podcasts dissected it. Memes appeared, some mocking, some strangely reverent. But almost none of them had the full picture. They didn't see the quiet tone in Keanu's voice. They didn't hear the pause before he stood up. They just saw a famous man walk away and assumed drama. But in living rooms and late-night shifts in hospital waiting areas, people who knew grief watched the clips differently. They saw something else, a boundary being honored, not broken. A man choosing to protect what mattered most, even if it meant walking away from the spotlight. One post started small, just a few lines from someone who worked backstage. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He looked Jimmy in the eye and said, "My daughter's name isn't a joke." Then he left. No drama, just dignity. It spread faster than the tabloid headlines. People shared it with messages like, "This is why I've always respected him," or "Finally someone said it." Meanwhile, Keanu stayed off his phone. He spent the morning fixing a leaky faucet in his kitchen, something he'd been putting off for weeks. There was comfort in simple tasks, turning a wrench, wiping up water, watching the drip stop. It was real. It was quiet. No one was watching, but the world kept spinning. By midday, news vans circled the studio lot, hoping for a statement. Kimmel's team released a short polish note. Last night's taping included an unexpected moment. We respect Mr. Reeves deeply and appreciate his honesty. It was careful, safe, but it didn't explain anything. Inside the studio, the mood was tense. Writers debated whether to address it on the next show. Some said yes, own it, apologize, move on. Others warned it could backfire. "People love Keanu," one said. "If we look like we're making excuses, we'll lose trust." Kimmel sat in his office, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't slept. The message he'd sent last night, "I owe you an apology. Not for the show. For me," hadn't been answered right away. But this morning, a reply came, "Call me." He dialed the number with sweaty palms, like a teenager asking someone out. When Keanu answered, his voice was calm, not cold. Hey, Kimmel said. "Thanks for taking my call." A pause. Then Keanu said, "I know you didn't mean harm." "I didn't," Kimmel said quickly. "But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt." "No," Keanu agreed. "It doesn't." They talked for nearly an hour. Not as host and guest, not as celebrities, but as 2 men who'd both lost people they loved. Kimmel admitted he'd used humor as a shield for years, joking about his own pain so no one would see how much it still ached. "It's easier to make people laugh than to let them see you cry," he said. Keanu understood that. "But sometimes," he said gently, "when you turn someone else's pain into a joke, even a soft one, it tells them their grief isn't safe with you." Kimmel was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I never thought of it like that. They didn't solve everything in that call, but they listened, really listened, and that was enough for now." While that conversation happened in private, something else unfolded online. The stagehand's post, anonymous at first, was shared by a mental health advocate with millions of followers. "This is what boundaries look like," she wrote. Not anger, not silence, but clear, kind truth. Schools started using the clip in counseling sessions. Grief support groups discussed it. People began talking, not about who was right, but about how we treat each other's wounds in public spaces. One woman posted a photo of her son's baseball glove with the caption, "His name was Daniel. He died at 16. I used to flinch every time someone said, 'Oh, you're so strong.' Like that made it okay he was gone. Last night, Keanu gave me permission to say, 'No, this isn't okay.' And that's all right. That post got tens of thousands of likes. Comments poured in. My sister, my best friend, my baby, names, stories, tears, all flowing into a quiet river of shared understanding. Back at the studio, the producer who'd pushed for the serious segment printed out some of those posts. She left them on Kimmel's desk with a sticky note. This is why it mattered. That evening, Kimmel sat alone in the empty studio after everyone had gone home. The chairs were stacked. The lights were dim. He walked to the guest chair, the one Keanu had sat in, and ran his hand over the armrest. He thought about all the people watching at home who carried invisible weights. He thought about his own father, gone 10 years now, whose jokes he still missed every Sunday. He picked up his notebook and started writing. Not jokes, not punchlines, just words, honest ones. Meanwhile, Keanu took a long walk through Griffith Park. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. A couple jogged past laughing. A dog barked in the distance. Life kept going as it always does. He stopped at a bench and sat for a while, watching the city lights flicker on below. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel angry. He just felt clear, like he'd done the right thing even if it wasn't easy. And maybe, just maybe, it had opened a door for others to speak their truth too. Later that night, he got a text from an old friend. Saw what happened. Proud of you. Keanu typed back, just trying to honor them. He didn't need headlines. He didn't need applause. He just needed to live in a way that made his loved ones' memories feel safe. And somewhere in 1,000 homes across the country, people were having real conversations about loss, about respect, about how kindness isn't just smiling through pain, but sometimes saying, Amari, this hurts, and that's okay. The story wasn't over, but the noise was finally starting to quiet down, making space for something deeper to grow. A few weeks later, the studio lights came up on a different kind of opening. No drumroll, no flashy graphics. Just Jimmy Kimmel standing alone at his desk, hands resting lightly on the wood, his usual smirk gone. The audience sat quietly, sensing this wasn't going to be like other nights. I want to talk about something real tonight, he began, voice softer than usual. A few weeks ago, I messed up, badly. I made a joke during an interview that shouldn't have been a joke at all. It wasn't mean-spirited, I swear it wasn't. But that doesn't matter. Because pain isn't about intent. It's about impact. He paused, looked down, then back up. Keanu Reeves walked off that stage not because he was angry, but because he was protecting something sacred. And I didn't see it in the moment. I was too busy thinking about the show, the timing, the laugh. I forgot that some things aren't meant to be turned into content. The audience didn't clap. They just listened. I called him the next day, Kimmel continued, and he was kind, kinder than I deserved. He didn't scold me. He just helped me understand. And that changed something in me. Then he announced something new, a recurring segment called Real Talk. No jokes, no punchlines, just honest conversations about grief, mental health, loss, and healing, with guests who wanted to speak, not perform. If you're hurting, he said, you don't have to be strong on TV. You just have to be you. The first guest that night was a firefighter who'd lost his team in a warehouse blaze. He spoke for 10 minutes, voice shaking at times, about survivor's guilt and how silence almost broke him. When he finished, the audience didn't cheer. They stood, not out of pity but respect. Keanu didn't watch the episode. He wasn't on social media. He didn't need to see it to know it mattered. He'd already moved on. Not from the moment, but with it. He'd gone back to his quiet routines, fixing things around the house, biking through neighborhoods where no one recognized him, stopping to help strangers when he could. One afternoon, he pulled over near a gas station where a car sat with its hood up. An older man stood beside it looking frustrated. Keanu got off his bike, walked over. Need a hand? The man looked up, squinting. You look familiar, Keanu smiled. Must be one of those faces. They spent the next 20 minutes checking the engine together. It turned out to be a loose battery cable. Simple fix. As Keanu tightened the last bolt, the man said, You're a good kid. Keanu laughed. I'm older than I look. They shook hands. The man asked if he could buy him a coffee. Keanu declined politely. Just glad it worked out. And just like that, he was back on his bike, disappearing into the afternoon light. No cameras. No audience, just one human helping another. Back in the city, the ripple from that night on the talk show kept spreading. Schools started using clips from Kimmel's apology and empathy workshops. Therapists reported more clients saying, "I saw that thing with Keanu, and I realized I don't have to pretend I'm okay." A nonprofit launched a campaign called Grief Isn't a Punchline, featuring real stories from everyday people. Even Hollywood changed, just a little. Writers' rooms began asking, would this joke hurt someone who's grieving? Producers started giving guests more control over interview topics. It wasn't perfect, but it was a shift. Luis, the stagehand, got a promotion, not because of what happened that night, but because people noticed how he treated everyone with quiet respect. At his new desk, he kept a small photo taped to the wall, a blurry backstage shot of Keanu helping roll cables years ago. Under it, he'd written in pencil, "Kindness is a choice, not a role." One evening, Luis's daughter came to visit him at work. She was 13 now, tall and quick-witted. As they walked past the main stage, she asked, "Is this where Keanu Reeves walked off?" Luis nodded. "Yeah." "Was it really a fight?" "No," he said. "It was the opposite. It was someone saying, 'This matters too much to joke about,' and that's brave." She thought about that for a while. Then she said, "I wish more people were like him." "Me too," Luis said. "But maybe we can all be a little more like that ourselves." Meanwhile, Keanu received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a plain envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from the woman who'd been in the audience that night, the one who'd driven 3 hours with a photo of her late husband. She wrote, "Thank you for showing me it's okay to protect his memory. I haven't laughed at a joke about loss since, and I feel lighter." He read it twice. Then he tucked it into the drawer where he kept other letters like it, notes from people who'd found a little hope because someone famous chose to be human instead of perfect. He never returned to the talk show. Not because there was bad blood, but because he didn't need to. The point had been made. The conversation had started. And sometimes that's enough. Years later, when people looked back on that moment, they wouldn't remember the headlines or the rumors. They'd remember the quiet courage it took to say, "This isn't funny," in a world that often demands we smile through pain. They'd remember that kindness isn't just about grand gestures. It's about honoring someone's truth even when it's inconvenient. And Keanu? He kept living the way he always had, not for the cameras, not for praise, but because it felt right. He'd sit with a grieving fan at a comic convention, not for photos, but because they needed to talk. He'd send a check to a struggling crew member without telling anyone. He'd stop his bike to help a stranger again and again like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because to him, it was. The story didn't end with a comeback or a grand reunion. It ended the way real life often does, with small acts of decency, with changed hearts, with people choosing to listen instead of perform. And in a world full of noise, that quiet kind of courage might just be the most powerful thing of all. Sometimes the loudest statements are made in silence. And sometimes walking away is the truest way to stay.